It was just another day at university when I met Lila. She was my roommate, and although at first I thought we would just be roommates, we quickly became great friends. She was a girl full of energy, always smiling and ready to party. In fact, we soon became quite popular, and everyone wanted to hang out with us because of our reputation as the party queens. Lila had a boyfriend called Edmund, a third-year student who always organized parties at his huge country house, where we used to go to let our hair down, dance and drink until we couldn't drink anymore. We were too young, so we didn't worry much about what would come next. One day, as the rain pounded against the windows of our room, we decided to stay in instead of going to class. Lila was locked in the bathroom, and I was lying in bed, wasting my time in my favorite way, watching random videos on my phone. Suddenly, Lila appeared in a rather provocative outfit, garter belt, lace and all. Wow! And where is Miss Dress to Kill going in this weather, may I ask? I jokingly asked her as I looked up surprised. Don't be an idiot, Bella. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to take some photos for my OnlyFans account, she replied with a laugh. I was stunned. You have an Only account? I asked wide-eyed. Of course, how do you think I pay for all this makeup and these fabulous clothes? She said calmly. Well, I thought maybe your parents gave you money, or your boyfriend, because I know it's not through working. I always knew that Lila had a penchant for shopping and in general had a spendthrift lifestyle, and although I had never seen her working, this really took me by surprise. Look, don't get me wrong. It's not that I was judging her or anything. I just wasn't expecting it. Coincidentally, in recent days, I had seen the news about a content creator on that platform who had been the victim of a stalker and ended up dead inside a garbage container. And I couldn't help thinking about that now, so with a tone of concern, I said to her, "But Lila, don't you think that could be dangerous for you? There are a lot of weirdos out there." Don't worry. I don't show my face on my account, and besides, who cares about my face? She replied dismissively. At least she seemed to be careful about her identity, and that made me feel a little relieved. From that day on, Lila began to take her new hobby seriously, doing photo shoots and videos almost every day. She never said anything to Ed about her new job, for want of a better word, and asked me to keep it a secret. How could I not support her if she was my best friend? A couple of days later, we decided to go to the university gym, and while we were training, we suddenly heard a voice behind us. "Do you come here often?" It was Mrs. Codrington, the librarian, who was looking at us. "Hello, Mrs. Codrington," I replied cheerfully, but instead of looking at me, she focused all her attention on Lila. "You have an amazing body, honey. You don't even need to train that much," she said. Lila smiled delightedly and replied, "Thank you. That's very flattering." The lady looked Lila up and down and asked, "And that mermaid tattoo on your waist, is that new?" "Yes, do you like it?" she joked. And after a brief laugh, the lady walked away while making a comment that made me raise an eyebrow. "You're pretty, but you have to be attractive if you want to get attention. Learn from Lila." I didn't want to be offended, but it made me feel a little insecure. "Come on, don't pay any attention to what she said," Lila said, trying to make me feel better. That night we went to a party at Edmund's house. It was crazy. All our classmates were there, the music was blaring, people were jumping in the pool, others were lying on the floor dancing. A full-blown university party. As soon as we arrived, Lila immediately launched into the drinks. I tried to convince her to stop, but it was like talking to a brick wall, so I decided to leave her be and joined some friends to dance on the dance floor. As I was dancing like there was no tomorrow to the rhythm of Dua Lipa, I saw Lila dancing near the pool with Edmund, and at that moment her phone rang. As she had left her cell phone with me, I decided to see who was calling her and saw that it was an unknown number. I shouted for Lila to come, but she couldn't hear me over the noise, so I went over to where she was and put her on the phone. When she saw the number, she stopped dancing, picked up the phone, and went outside to talk. I just carried on chatting to the others. That night, most of us decided to stay the night at Edmund's house, but when we woke up, chaos was waiting for us. As I shook off some of the sleep, I heard Edmund shout in desperation, "Where the hell is she? What do you mean nobody has seen her? Someone tell me something." I woke up confused and immediately went over to him. "What's going on, Ed? Why are you so upset?" I asked, feeling intrigued by his outburst. "I have no idea where Lila is and no one has seen her since the party. I called her phone and there was only silence. It was turned off." "Have you seen her?" he said to me, almost shouting, visibly desperate. At that moment, I felt a knot in my stomach. My best friend had disappeared and nobody had any idea where she could be. No, this can't be happening, I thought, and worry began to take hold of me. That was the last night I saw my best friend. From that day on, the whole university was involved in the search for her, and the police also got involved. All of her friends and classmates were questioned over and over again, but there was not a single clue as to her whereabouts. 3 days passed, and Lila's parents were devastated, crying nonstop and desperate. The atmosphere at the university was terrifying. Everyone felt uneasy. How could someone disappear overnight without a trace? I remember telling the police about the mysterious call Lila received and how she went to answer it and never came back. I also mentioned her OnlyFans account. I didn't want to have to, but it was necessary to try to find some clue about her, something that could lead us to her whereabouts. But of course, this revelation sparked a mountain of rumors among the students. Some said that someone sick on the platform had kidnapped her. Others thought she was partying somewhere and would be back soon. However, I knew there was something darker behind her disappearance. 4 days after I last saw my friend, the police found footage from the security cameras on a pole near Edmund's house. In those recordings, Lila was seen leaving the place and standing for a moment on the sidewalk, looking around as if waiting for someone. Then a van appeared from the right and she approached. The driver's window was down, and although they didn't see the driver, Lila got into the vehicle, which meant that she knew the person who was there. The next morning, the campus was full of police cars. It turned out that the van belonged to Mrs. Codrington, the librarian. Yes, the same lady who was always so kind to Lila. The police arrested her immediately. Apparently, she had picked Lila up right in front of Edmund's house, but she was not seen again after that. That same afternoon, the officers searched Mrs. Codrington's house and made a chilling discovery. There were 2 bodies in her basement. One was her husband, Mr. Frederick Codrington, and the other was Lila, both shot to death. The whole university was in shock. No one could believe that Mrs. Codrington would do such a thing. But what motive could she have? Well, it turns out that her husband had been cheating on her with Lila for months. Mrs. Codrington saw Lila for the first time on her OnlyFans account, one night when she stole her husband's cell phone. There, she also came across a series of messages they had been exchanging and a series of very compromising photographs and videos, some of her and others of both of them. It seems that the income from her Only account was not the only thing that Lila was receiving, but that Mr. Codrington had been spending a lot of money on her. This made Mrs. Codrington lose her mind and decide to do what she did. First, she kidnapped her husband in the basement, and once there, she forced him to call Lila to set the trap. I saw the video of her confession, and Mrs. Codrington was out of control. She was shouting things like, "These girls think they own the world. They think they can make fun of other women just because they're young and pretty." She also revealed that when she saw Lila's mermaid tattoo, she knew right away that this was the girl who had her husband. She went crazy and started screaming that it gave her great pleasure to shoot him until she ran out of bullets. Worst of all, she made her husband look at the photos she had taken of him. "Don't you like this, honey? You liked it when I posed for you in those photos. Now do you like this?" I was in shock. My best friend murdered by that crazy woman. The same woman who thought that if she uploaded photos to the internet, she could get fame and money. Sometimes I sit alone in my room, mentally replaying the moment Lila went to take that call. Part of me wishes I could go back in time and change everything. Why didn't I push harder? Why didn't I stop her? Since that tragedy, the memory of Lila is always present. Her laughter, her energy, and the pain she left in all of us. I may never find answers, but I will always carry her memory with me. In the past, I was a rich kid, very spoiled. My parents always gave me everything I wanted. Just to give you an idea, for my 18th birthday, my dad bought me a Lamborghini. Maybe it was because of that excess of affection that I started to become somewhat selfish and to look down on others. When I got to university, I met new friends. One of them was George, my roommate, who was the typical funny guy who was always playing pranks and annoying everyone. One day while we were relaxing at home, George blurted out to me, "Did you know that Albani has an OnlyFans account? I assure you it will warm your heart, if you know what I mean." Curious about what he had told me, I went home and decided to do some research on the platform. However, I wasn't planning to look for Albani herself. I was just browsing, and I ended up getting carried away by the content. The sight of girls willing to do anything for money blew my mind. Sometimes some accounts were so weird that they even made me feel uncomfortable. I remember seeing a girl making a video of her licking her partner's blood. I had no idea why anyone would do that. And the truth is, I still don't understand it. But one day, while browsing aimlessly on the platform, I came across a profile entitled Sleeping Beauty. I was immediately curious, so without thinking too much about it, I subscribed for $5. The page loaded while I went to the kitchen to get some chips, and when I returned, the screen showed an incredibly beautiful girl. She was so young that I doubted her age on the page because she looked like a teenager, about 15 or 16, but she was too beautiful. The girl was wearing very sexy clothes and was posing in a way that made her look like she was sleeping, lying on the bed with her eyes closed. I liked her style. She was enigmatic and different from many others I'd seen. So I decided to send her a message. "Hi, Sleeping Beauty. There's no doubt you're beautiful." It wasn't long before she replied, "Hi, Jack. I like you already." We continued chatting, and she complimented my comments on her photos. "Thanks, love. Would you like to see more?" she asked. I looked at the screen, a little intrigued. "Sure," I replied. Then she sent me a photo that cost $10 to unlock. I paid for it without thinking, and there it was, a clear image of her face, without clothes. "Wow, your skin is perfect," I replied. "Do you want to see more?" "How far are you willing to go, Jack?" she asked. "Whatever you ask me to." The truth is that it was weird but almost addictive. I was chatting with her in a way that seemed completely normal for the site, so I continued to delve into this. That same night, I spent about $100 on her photos, but there was one constant in each image. She always kept her eyes closed. This made me think about what her gaze would be like if she decided to open her eyes. The next day, I couldn't resist the temptation to tell George about my new obsession. "Wait, what? $100 in one night? Are you crazy? That girl must be laughing at you right now. Who spends that much on naked photos, bro?" he said, clearly skeptical. But even though he was right, I couldn't stop thinking about her. That connection, although virtual, had me trapped. Every night before going to sleep, I would talk to this girl, exploring all the madness that the platform brought. I didn't mind spending between $30 and $50 sometimes. But then after 2 or 3 days, she stopped connecting. I looked for her online. I sent her messages, but nothing. I felt very frustrated and started to think that maybe I had scared her off. 4 days went by without hearing from her, and I was getting more and more anxious. But one night, to my surprise, I finally started to receive messages from her. My heart racing, I opened the OnlyFans app and saw her message. "Where have you been all this time?" I asked excitedly. "Sorry, I've been a bit busy. Did you miss me?" she replied in a playful tone. "Of course I did. I missed you loads. I think I'm falling in love with you, and I need you to tell me your name today." "What does a name matter, Jack?" she replied evasively. I tried to play along and said, "I want to meet you in person. Tell me when and where, and I'll be there." "Oh, how desperate you are. I like that in a guy," she laughed. "But seriously, don't make fun of me. I want to look at your eyes. Send me a video," I asked. "That's not possible, Jack, but I can send you other photos that you'll like." Then, in an instant, and without time for me to reply, she sent me a picture of herself in blue pajamas. However, something about her skin looked strange. She was so pale that it made me uneasy. She had taken the photo from above, and it wasn't like her usual self. The shape of her body was somewhat stretched, almost as if someone had taken the photo from above. I also noticed bruises around her ankles. "My God, are you hurt? What happened to you?" I asked her, worried. "What? Oh, those are just bruises from a photo shoot, a special issue," she replied mischievously. "Listen, I have a lot of money. I can help you. You don't have to keep doing these shoots, just meet me once, I promise it'll be fun." But she quickly disconnected, leaving my message unanswered. That night I couldn't sleep, thinking about what had happened. Maybe I scared her, or she cared more about the money than opening up to me. The next morning I woke up to find that I had been blocked from her account. I felt devastated, so bad that I stopped going out, socializing, and completely isolated myself. One day, browsing Facebook, I suddenly saw her again, but not as I expected. It was a missing poster with her photo. I was sure it was the same girl from OnlyFans, but this time her eyes were open. The text read, "15-year-old Casey has been missing for a month. The last time she was seen, she was wearing a white shirt and a blue skirt returning home from school. Contact the parents, Gregory and Marlene Smith, if you have any information." I was paralyzed. I was in such shock that it took me a few minutes to process what I had just read. My heart was racing like never before, and the first thing I did was run to my dad and tell him everything. We went to the police immediately and called her parents, but not before saving all the photos she had sent me, even the last one. But the real terror came when I realized why her eyes were closed in all the pictures. Some monster had drugged her and taken those photos. It was clear that she was writing to me to get money. I was scared to think about what could have happened to her. The police traced her profile and found the guy. A 40-year-old man who lived in a cabin far from the city. This guy had been stalking Cassie and had kidnapped her on her way home. When the officers arrived, they found the man trying to hide his crime by burning her body. It was horrifying. She had woken up during the attack and probably tried to defend herself, but he hit her on the head with an object. She had died instantly. The worst part was finding out that this guy tried to make money by sending photos of her body, which is why her skin looked so pale in the last picture he sent me. I felt a knot in my stomach that almost made me vomit, and I deleted all the photos I had. The man was arrested for kidnapping and murder, and justice was served, but it wouldn't bring Casey back. Her parents moved out of the city after this horrific episode, unable to bear the pain. Since then, I decided not to subscribe to OnlyFans again, nor to enter that world again. Sometimes I wonder if her soul will find peace. I just knew that her life should not have ended like that. I was sitting in my room taking another selfie with a cleavage that left little to the imagination, and I uploaded it to my OnlyFans profile. I can't deny that I loved seeing the reactions that started to come in, because in real life I was just a nerdy girl with huge glasses and baggy clothes who went unnoticed. But in the world of fans, I was a daring and sexy goddess whom nobody knew in her real life. All I wanted was to keep that a secret, so I never told anyone. I closed my laptop with a sigh, as I had to start studying for an exam, and after a couple of hours of half-hearted reading, I decided to take another look at my fan page. I started reading the comments, almost all of them from guys showering me with compliments and flattery, but there was one from a fan who told me he wanted to see me in a red bikini, and then others started asking me to do just that. I felt my lips involuntarily curve into a smile of satisfaction. That feeling of being desired and admired can really be addictive. I found it interesting, as I had recently bought a tiny red bikini online that left little to the imagination, so without thinking too much, I put it on and decided to look up provocative poses on Google. Then I uploaded some new photos and watched in amazement as the compliments and admiring comments doubled, as did my engagement with my page and my fans. At 21, I was one step away from graduating from college, and my parents were taking care of my expenses, even though they were in another state, so my foray into the Blue Page was more out of pleasure than necessity. But of course I liked the extra income it gave me. After updating my page, I remembered that I had to go to bed early that night, as I needed to be awake in time for my exam the next day, so I went to sleep. The next morning, I went to the university as I did every day and took my exam. Everything went smoothly, so I'm sure it was an A. When I finished my academic activities, I packed my things and went home. When I arrived, I opened my backpack and took out my books to study, but suddenly, I noticed a piece of paper that had fallen out of my bag. I picked it up and saw something written, "I know what you do, sexy Lexi. I know your little secret." I almost dropped the note from the shock. My skin prickled and the blood drained from my face. Sexy Lexi was my username on OnlyFans, which could only mean one thing. Someone had discovered my secret, and that was not a good thing. I felt so desperate that I didn't know what to do. So I decided that the best thing was to try to get some sleep and think things through in the morning. But in the middle of the night, an icy wind came in through the window, and I woke up with a start. I looked at the clock and saw that it was 1:30 in the morning, still about 5 hours before it was time to get ready for class. So I got up to close the window and go back to sleep. But that's when I saw another piece of paper hanging from the handle. I went over and picked it up and realized it was another note, exactly like the one I'd found in my backpack. "Sexy Lexi, you even look sexy when you sleep. Meet me by the physics lab at 6 p.m. tomorrow." I was frozen. My heart raced and my legs began to wobble, so I sat down again, holding the note too anxiously to think clearly. Who on earth was this person and what did they want from me? From that moment on, I couldn't sleep anymore. The next day I showed up at the right place, increasingly scared because as I walked I realized that there was no one on that side of the campus and it was all very dark. Suddenly, I heard a voice. "Hi, Lexi." I turned around immediately and my heart sank. It was Brand, a boy from my class. He smiled at me, and noticing the expression on my face, that smile spread from ear to ear. "Who knew there was such a beautiful woman under that pile of simple clothes?" he said, slowly approaching me. I froze. I didn't know how to react. I just told him to leave me alone, but he laughed, and with one stride he stood in front of me, grabbed me by the waist and pressed me against his body. "If you scream, everyone will know your dirty little secret," he warned me, and that terrified me. I shook my head and begged him not to tell anyone. I could feel his breath on my neck as he pressed his body harder against mine. I felt such revulsion that I pushed him, and he fell to the floor. "Don't ever do that again," I shouted at him and ran to my room, but as I was leaving, he shouted that I would regret it. That night, I didn't post anything on my OnlyFans page. I wasn't in the mood and I was upset, but even so, I couldn't help but scroll through my followers' comments as a way of trying to cheer myself up. But my heart leapt when I saw a new one that said, "Sexy Lexi goes to my university." A chill ran through my body. It was Brand. I immediately sent him a direct message asking him what the hell was going on, but his answer was clear and direct. "I want you to spend a night with me, and for that you have to be sexy Lexi, not boring Alexis." I looked at his message, feeling a knot in my stomach, thinking about how difficult it would be to get out of this bad situation. What was I going to do now? I was in my room, deciding that maybe the best way to deal with Brand was to let him do what he wanted. After all, I couldn't take any more threats. The thought of him telling everyone my secret made my stomach turn, but I preferred that to letting that thug lay a finger on me. So I sent him a message saying he could do whatever he wanted with what he knew, and to my surprise, he didn't reply. I felt a sense of relief at the thought that it was all over. I tried to relax and went to sleep with a smile on my face, feeling a little freer. It's amazing how secrets can sometimes weigh so heavily. However, the wind blowing through the window woke me up with a jolt once again. This time I didn't even bother to look at the time because I suddenly felt a presence in my room, and before I could scream, someone threw themselves on top of me, covering my mouth with a gloved hand. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, and I cursed my decision to sleep with the lights off. "Not so brave now, are you, Lexi?" My blood ran cold in that instant. I recognized that voice. It was Brand. Without giving me time to do anything, he pushed me towards the bed, holding my wrists with one hand and lifting them above my head. "If you scream, I'm going to slit your throat," he said, showing me the knife in his hand. I would like to say that I was able to defend myself, or that someone arrived at the last minute and prevented what happened next, but that was not the case. Brand abused me, and I had never been so terrified and humiliated in my life. But just when I finally thought the nightmare was over, Brand forced me to dress as in my photos on the website and took a lot of photos with his cell phone. "I just want you to give me some personal photos, and if you do, I'll let you get on with your life," he said. "And I promise you that no one will find out about your little secret, or what happened today," were his words. As soon as Brand left, I did two things. I closed my page and called the police. A few hours later, he was arrested, and yes, inevitably, my secrets came to light. The hardest part came from my parents. They were very disappointed, especially because they were quite religious and in no way approved of what I was doing. The truth is that it was hard, but at least I got justice. This was the most terrifying and traumatic episode of my life, and although some time has passed, I'm still dealing with the consequences. Hi, my name is Elza and I turned 21 last month. When I came of age, I decided to move out on my own and start university. I had always believed that I could conquer the world, but the truth is that being an adult is more complicated than it seems, especially when it comes to paying rent and tuition, which is why I ended up taking a job at McDonald's as a waitress. But I didn't last long because I needed time to study. I often found myself using my savings to make ends meet, and with each passing day, those savings became less and less. It was urgent that I find another job, but I knew that an extra job would take time away from my studies and I couldn't risk dropping out of university. One day, an Instagram follower asked me if I sold content and I said no, to which he very kindly suggested that I should because he found me attractive. I appreciated the compliment but made it clear that it wasn't something I was looking for. I had always been a bit shy and I didn't like showing too much of my body. It wasn't in my plans. However, my curiosity got the better of me, so I asked him how selling content worked. He explained everything to me and even said he would be my first client if I decided to open an account. The situation seemed a bit suspicious to me, especially because I didn't totally trust this guy. His profile had no posts, and in fact, he had a photo of a drawing that I used to see with my brother when we were little. I decided to consult some friends who had accounts on similar platforms, and they told me it would be an excellent idea. The truth is that I had a good number of male followers who had been following me since I left my Tinder profile, so maybe it wasn't so crazy. After making a few calls and having a long photo session at home with some friends, I went back to look at my Instagram profile. I felt brave, as if I was ready to do things that I would never have dared to show anyone in my life. So, at the end of the night, I decided to open my OnlyFans account and announce it in my stories. To my surprise, the next morning when I checked my computer, I found at least 25 messages from people interested in buying my photos. Among those messages, I saw one from the guy who had encouraged me to open my account. Reading his message, I realized that he was not only happy, but that he wanted more. He asked me for videos of me without clothes. I had already recorded some videos like this one before, so I thought I could send him one I already had, hoping he would think I was recording it at that moment. After a few minutes of hesitation, I sent him the video, and to my surprise, he accepted, made the payment immediately, and replied praising my content. The messages started coming in one after another, and although it was strange, something about this guy intrigued me. He had similar taste to mine. We laughed about many things, we watched the same films, and we had things in common. We talked and flirted easily, and I must admit that it amused me. As the days went by, although other clients also began to flirt with me, I always remembered that my relationship with them was strictly professional. Most understood that, but there was always someone who got angry. In those cases, thanks to the website, I could block them without any problems. Now, as well as being able to concentrate on my studies, I also found time to do things I really enjoyed. The new income stream gave me the freedom to organize my expenses and, who knows, even save a little. It was as if what had started out as a chance for survival had become something fun and liberating, but over time, it also started to become a kind of game. However, I had to be careful. I never stopped reminding myself that all of this was a step too far and that I had to keep everything under control. Although I was doing well and feeling more empowered, I always had in the back of my mind the idea that I couldn't let this get out of hand. University life and this new phase of my life were starting to intertwine, and I felt that every day that passed could lead to a new, unexpected turn, something that I definitely hadn't anticipated when I decided to move out on my own. One day I decided to take a trip to visit my parents and my brother. The truth is that I hadn't seen them in years, so I was excited, but I also had to make up a story about my job. I told them that I had been given the day off at McDonald's. The day went by so fast it was fun, and when the afternoon came, I realized that my 16-year-old brother wasn't at home. My plan was to surprise him, so I decided to wait for him in his room. When I went in, I saw that his room was just as I had left it, a complete mess. I took advantage of the moment to distract myself and went over to his computer. Looking around, I noticed that he had a browser open, and I couldn't help but be curious to see what he had there. When I opened it, I was completely shocked. I couldn't believe my eyes. There were photos and videos of me completely naked there, on his screen. With my heart racing, I searched another tab I had opened and found out. It was the guy I had been chatting with. The same one who had convinced me to open an OnlyFans account and who I had been flirting with all this time. Suddenly, I felt perplexed. My brother knew things about me that he shouldn't have, but it was all in his hands. It was as if he didn't really know me, and I felt totally disoriented. Feeling dizzy, I ended up throwing up. I looked at the floor and saw that I was surrounded by used napkins. Suddenly, the situation became clear. I felt sick and completely disgusted. I was in the middle of my indignation when I heard someone come in and heard my name. It was him, my brother. "Elsa, don't be angry. This is not what it looks like. A friend showed me these things and I didn't know it was you," he said nervously. But his tone of voice was soft, and that made me even more furious. I knew him well, and I was sure he was lying. Without thinking, I approached him and slapped him. Then my brother started to cry, and he did nothing to defend himself, but suddenly he changed his attitude and suddenly pushed me against the bed, becoming a different person. His face filled with rage, and he began to threaten me. "If you tell, I'll tell everyone about your account. I'll send the photos to everyone I know too," he said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Anger took over, and I blurted out that I was going to tell our parents everything. I didn't care if they found out about my page. What he had done was unacceptable. My little brother had crossed a line from which there was no return. However, my protest only seemed to intensify his anger. As we argued, his face, full of anger, began to crumble in front of me. He was afraid that what he had done might come to light. And suddenly he started crying again, feeling cornered. But as he lamented, he did something I never imagined he would do. He went to the window, opened it, and without saying a word, jumped headfirst to the ground. I ran to the window, screaming to try to stop him, but it was too late. I couldn't believe what I had seen. My parents ran out of the house, terrified to see their son lying on the ground, his head open. The scene was heartbreaking, and I was paralyzed, crying and full of confusion. The police arrived, and for a while they seemed to suspect me, but seeing that there were no signs of a struggle, they determined that it had been a suicide. After what happened, I decided to tell my parents the whole truth. But honestly, I didn't have the strength to lie anymore. They kicked me out of the house, telling me they never wanted to see me again. That was the last I heard from them. From then on, I continued with my only account. but I lost all motivation to interact with customers. What had started out as a way to get by had turned into a nightmare. Guilt and anguish consumed me, and although I was still making some money, I realized it wasn't worth the price I had to pay. Those moments would stay with me forever, reminding me how fragile life can be and how one moment can change everything. "Stop, Yesenia," I shouted as she dragged me towards the bathroom. Yesenia stopped with a sigh of frustration. That day began like any other. Yesenia was my twin sister, and although we were alike in every way, we were very different in personality. She was adventurous, always ready to throw herself into something new, while I was more cautious and prudent. While my twin sister was dedicated to fashion, I was immersed in the study of psychology. Despite our different specialties, there was no way they could confuse us, but that never stopped us from doing crazy things together. Her latest idea was to do the twin exchange, an experiment that had been a disaster in 3rd grade. The idea was simple. For 1 week, I would live like her, and she like me. After long hours of styling, I let myself be convinced, and by the time she had made me ready and beautiful, the truth was, I was almost unrecognizable. Looking at myself in the mirror, even she was satisfied with her creation, saying that I looked incredible. I didn't know whether to laugh or be scared because the clothes I was wearing were quite short and made me feel quite uncomfortable. But as always, I couldn't resist, so I simply gave in, since it was only for that week. When I finally brought up the plan, I realized that in addition to dressing like her, I had to attend her classes, and she had to attend mine. That was the easy part. Now the hardest part would be to relate to all her friends since they were extroverts while mine were complete bookworms. That mix of personalities could be explosive. As I left the building, I noticed a guy in a black sweatshirt and sunglasses standing at the entrance. It seemed strange to me to see him there so early. He was probably waiting for a friend or something, so I decided not to think about it. But having him walking behind me seemed strange to me too, because Yesenia always hated getting up early. However, today she had decided to leave early. Maybe she just wanted to impress someone. I sighed, thinking that this would be one of those days made fun of thanks to my sister. I walked to the university, and as I tried to concentrate, I noticed that the guy from before was approaching. How strange. Now he was on his phone, and apparently he was also a fashion student. I didn't recognize him because I didn't know all of my sister's classmates, but it didn't matter. So I continued on until I reached the classroom, and suddenly he was sitting right next to me. I froze. There I was, trying to impersonate my sister while this guy seemed especially interested in me. The classroom was full of laughter and whispers, but for some reason, I felt out of place. I tried to ignore him, thinking it was going to be a boring day. Then the teacher started talking about new trends, but my mind wandered between what might happen if Yesenia got into my classes and how this boy seemed to study my every move. Every time I turned my head, I found him looking at me. My heart was beating faster, and I wondered if I had really done the right thing in swapping lives for a week. The idea was fun, but the reality felt strange. What if I ended up in trouble, like in 3rd grade? I remembered what happened that time, and anxiety filled me, but we were here, and the adventure was just beginning. So I couldn't let fear stop me. I had to take advantage of the madness and find out what my sister's life would really be like, even if it meant being next to this mysterious guy. As I tried to keep up with the class, I couldn't help wondering what else I had gotten myself into. I couldn't believe it. He was also a student in the class. He put his bag on a chair and greeted me. "Hello," he said, and I was a little surprised, so I replied before concentrating again on my psychology and fashion books. Then the boy asked me about my major, and I realized that I had forgotten to get Yesenia's textbooks and that it was her class. "Yes, I'm just a fan of psychology," I replied, trying to sound relaxed. He seemed even more confused. "Are you a model from that website? I know you are, but it looks like you're just playing," he said sarcastically. "What page?" I asked, completely lost. I loved that she was so into fashion, she said, and then he blurted out something that made my blood run cold. "You know I've seen your photos and I promise I'll make your life hell if you ignore me," he said before picking up his bag and leaving. I stood there, open-mouthed, trying to process what had just happened. I just wanted to ask my sister about it, because at the end of the day, she was the one who knew this guy. Classes went on as usual, but the interaction with him was something that wouldn't leave my mind. Every time I tried to concentrate, what he had said kept echoing in my head. I was almost about to leave class when suddenly I felt a firm hand grab the neck of my t-shirt, so I straightened my back and looked behind me. I couldn't believe it was him, the mysterious boy in the black hoodie, with his cold gaze and dark glasses. He had a firm grip on my arm and I was paralyzed. I screamed for help, but the mocking laugh he gave me made me feel even more vulnerable. Finally, he let go of me and left, leaving me trembling with confusion. After a long day, I returned to our room and saw my sister curled up in bed, her eyes full of tears. When she realized I was coming in, she sat up and quickly wiped her face, but it was obvious that she had been crying. "How did it go today?" she asked me, trying to hide her sadness behind a smile that didn't suit her. "And why are you crying?" I asked her. At that moment, the tears flowed again. My sister began to tell me that she had opened an account on an adult site because of pressure from her friends and that, since then, she had been receiving threats. Just when I understood that the boy who had threatened me was after her, anger began to grow inside me. "Which guy is threatening you?" I asked her, and I knew I couldn't stand by and do nothing. After talking to her for a long time, I finally convinced her to file a complaint against that boy. What he was doing was harassment, and he could go to prison for it. My sister hesitated, but then she understood that it was the right thing to do. However, the complaint was never filed. A few minutes later, she received a call from a classmate. "Did you see what happened?" she asked, alarmed. "No. What?" my sister asked, frightened. "A boy was just murdered on campus." We both froze, but then we found out that the victim was the very guy who was enjoying her. Someone had slit his throat with a knife in the courtyard. We never found out who did it or why, but I'd be lying to you if I said it didn't give me some relief. That degenerate is now dead, and my sister was finally free of his threat. My name is Laura, and I'm 23 years old. A couple of years ago, I decided to become a content creator on the OnlyFans platform. You know, the one with exclusive adult content. And today I want to tell you about a terrible experience I had a while ago. This happened in 2023. At that time, I was having financial problems, and a friend who was already part of the platform introduced me to OF as an alternative way of earning extra money. At first, I didn't really know what it was all about, but then she explained it to me, and it seemed to me that it wasn't complicated at all. It was just a matter of shaking off my modesty a bit, and that was it. So that same afternoon, I signed up and started uploading provocative photos for my subscribers. Sometimes I would upload some videos too, and before long I began to realize that the earnings were pretty good. But as always, I wanted a little more. So after a while, I decided to start getting to know my fans. Those who supported me the most and were willing to spend more could pay to spend a night with me. However, as I was aware that these encounters could be risky, I contacted my friend Marcus, a strong guy with experience in martial arts. I had an agreement with him. Every time I went on a date with a fan, I would make sure that Marcus knew exactly where I was. He would do me a favor, and if he didn't hear from me in a couple of hours, he would come looking for me. In exchange, I would give him 20% of what I earned on that date. This friend was basically my personal security, something necessary in the environment in which I moved, and for a time it worked perfectly well, until one night, I received an invitation from a particular fan. I was talking to a guy named Pablo. At first, he didn't seem very sociable. He preferred me to send him photos rather than chat. I was a bit skeptical, so I ignored his messages, but then I got a text where he bragged about his bank account. "I can pay you more than you can imagine. More than anyone else would pay you, he said. The amount he showed was amazing, and it made me feel intrigued, so I decided to accept his offer. I immediately wrote to Marcus to inform him of the address and time. However, he told me that he was ill, but that he had a friend called Javier who could help me. He met Javier at a boxing class and told me he was trustworthy, so he gave him my number. A day later, I received a message from Javier with his details, and we agreed on a time before I went out to meet him. I took a taxi and headed for the house that Pablo had told me about, and when I arrived, I was surprised to see that it was a fairly normal house, not very luxurious as I had imagined, considering what he had told me about his money. With a little hesitation, I knocked on the door and it opened with a squeak. Soon a handsome, well-dressed young man appeared, with a big smile and bright eyes. He gave me a hug and said, "Hi, you must be Laura. Pablo is waiting for you in the bedroom." At that moment, I realized that the guy in front of me was not Pablo. What a pity, I thought. I was a little disappointed, so I asked him, "Can you take me to the bedroom?" The guy kindly led me to the second floor, and when he opened the door, I was very surprised. I found an old man, about 70 years old, waiting inside. The situation was totally unexpected and left a bad taste in my mouth. It was a total disaster. I stared at the old man in the bed, his white hair and wrinkles making him look almost like a ghost, and when he saw me, his eyes seemed to light up with a mixture of desire and madness. "Hello, I'm Pablo, your biggest fan," he said to me, smiling in a disturbing way as a drop of saliva slid from his mouth. In that instant, I knew I wanted nothing to do with him, no matter how much money he offered me. "I'm sorry, Pablo. I think this was a mistake." Turning around, I tried to run away, but the young man who had brought me here pushed me and slammed the door shut. I panicked and tried to open it, but it was locked. I managed to shout and bang on the door for help, but Pablo interrupted me. "There's no one to help you. No one will hear your screams, darling. If you try to resist, my son will come and do terrible things that, believe me, you will want to avoid." I knew at that moment that the boy who had brought me here was his son. What kind of family was this? In desperation, I stopped struggling with the door, realizing that I had no choice but to put up with the situation. Pablo seemed to notice my anger and started laughing as he told me he wanted everything to be fun. I had never felt so powerless in my life, but I knew that fighting back could only make things worse. I was at the mercy of those two guys, and being difficult could only lead to something worse. In the end, I was forced to leave and started to undress. I just wanted this to end quickly so I could go home. "That's my girl," he said with a laugh while I felt more and more trapped and humiliated. I tried to look for my phone in my pockets, but I quickly understood. Pablo's son had taken it while he was hugging me. Frustration took hold of me, and all I could do was wait for Javier, Marcus's friend, to notice that something was wrong and come to my rescue. In the meantime, I decided to buy some time, so I started dancing while undressing and made sure to spend a good amount of time on that. At first, Pablo was thrilled, but then he started to get impatient. However, when I told him that all this was part of the foreplay, he seemed to calm down. Then I tried to play with him by running around the room, telling him to try to catch me. I hid under the bed, laughing to make him believe it was a game. I wanted him to think I was enjoying this, but really I was just trying to delay him. A few minutes passed and it seemed like he was getting tired, so I finally told him I needed to use the bathroom. "I can't wait any longer," he said, grabbing my wrists. I tried to free myself, but the old man was stronger than he looked. And after a struggle that felt eternal, I managed to break free of his grip. I hit him, and he screamed for help. At that moment, his son burst into the room, grabbed me, and started hitting me. In the confusion, my phone fell out of Pablo's son's pocket and hit the floor. Without thinking, I reached out, picked it up, and managed to dial Javier's number. It was then that the young man punched me in the face, snatching the phone from my hands, and almost immediately I heard the ring of another mobile. I looked and saw that he also had a phone. At that moment, the truth hit me like a train. I realized that the boy I was fighting with was none other than Javier himself. On realizing that I had found out, Javier threw my phone against the wall and started laughing while he held me down with his big hands, squeezing my neck. In that instant, everything went dark. I didn't know how I was going to get out of this hell, but I realized two things. One, that there was a huge window in the room, and two, that one of my heels was lying next to me, so, in a completely desperate act, I reached for the shoe, and with all the strength I had left, I smashed it into Javier's eye. He let out a blood-curdling scream and pushed me away. Then I saw blood coming from his eye, and without thinking too much, I seized the opportunity and ran towards the window. I jumped without thinking twice, breaking the glass that tore my skin on the way out. But I didn't care. All I wanted was to get out of that hell. I landed on the lawn in pain, torn and a mess, but happy to have escaped that nightmare. The first thing I did was to go to a friend's house, which was the closest I had to that place. I could hardly speak about what had happened, but I told her everything, and we decided to call the police and gave them all the details we could. At first, I hesitated to call Marcus because after what I had been through, I was terrified that he was part of the same plot. But finally, I made the call and told him what had happened to me with Javier. Marcus was as shocked as I was, and he promised to help me with the investigation, offering all the information he had about him to the authorities. Shortly afterwards, the police caught Javier and Pablo, and you can't imagine how relieved I felt to know that those monsters would be behind bars. Even so, what I experienced left a mark on me that I will never forget. From that day on, I decided to stop using fans. I used to enjoy creating content on the platform, but now it only brings back memories of a nightmare that I never want to relive. Although I tried to move on, the nightmares often return, reminding me of the terror I experienced.